Well, welcome to the Aging Boomers. I'm your host, Frank Sampson. Of course, on our show, we discuss so many of the issues facing boomers, their parents, and what we know, of course, is an aging population today. So I want to remind everybody that today's show is sponsored by Senior Care Authority, a professional senior placement and elder care management organization that has a national network of advisors to help in determining the right path for senior living and receiving proper care. So whether it's in-home care, assisted living, residential, or memory care, get the necessary advice from a senior care advisor right in your area by calling Senior Care Authority at 888-809-1231 or go to www.seniorcareauthority.com. And again, I just want to thank everybody for all their support. Our list of listeners, that doesn't sound right, but our listeners are growing every day. So many of you, many of you have gone to our website at theagingboomers.com, but I have to say, most of you just download the free app on your iPhone, Android phone, iPad. Just go to the Aging Boomers. It's free, and you get updated on your phone on all of our interviews with so many great people in our industry. So speaking of that, I do want to introduce Ken Rader. Ken has been with Pacific Modern Homes for 21 years and is Vice President of Sales and Marketing. And Pacific Modern Homes is a company specializing in helping individuals build their own home, barn, or garage. Pacific Modern Homes has 37 pre-engineered home plans. They also have a series of pre-engineered home plans that are designed for aging in place. These plans are part of their transitional home environment designed to help transition people throughout all of life stages. Very interesting concept. Ken, welcome to the Aging Boomers.
Thanks, Frank. Great to be here.
Yeah, great to have you on. So, though I maybe touched on it in the introduction, give us kind of an overview of your company, Pacific Modern Homes.
Great, thanks. We've been in business since 1968, so we're coming up on 50 years now. And we manufacture wall panels and roof trusses and draw and engineer home plans. So someone who's wanting to build their own home and act as basically their own general contractor, where they manage the project, but they don't have a general contractor that marks up all the work, so it helps save them 20 to 30% in the building cost of their home. So what we do is we manufacture these components, and it's still a traditional built house. And then we have dealers all over the world that someone would work with that would help them with local contractor referrals. Some do their own building, but some need help with that, and also permit processing, things like that. So when someone wants to work with us, they go to our website at pmhi.com, and then they find a dealer for their area, and they're able to get to the next step.
Great. So you have dealers all over.
Right. Yeah. When you go to our website that I just mentioned, you'll hover over a dealers tab, and it drops down. It says find a dealer, and you click the state or country you're in, and then you move on from there.
Great. That's great. So I think we want to put a little more emphasis on one portion of your business, which I'm sure is a growing part of your business, which you call transitional home environment. Tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, the transitional home environment, what happened is that over the time that we've been designing plans, we saw more and more of our customers were in the baby boomer group, because many people, they don't just decide they're going to go build a house tomorrow morning when they wake up. It's a planned thing. And so they look for land. Some build in rural areas. Some build in infill lots. As you see an empty lot in an existing subdivision type thing. And so they plan on making that happen. So it's a process that they go through. And what we saw was that a number of them, as they were aging, didn't have in their mind what was life going to look like when they got older. But what was really interesting, our primary customer in all this is a woman, age 25 to 54, and women tend to be more thought thoughtful about what is it going to look like in the future. Guys, not so much. It's slightly stereotyped, obviously, but
well, the
women were thinking
women are smarter than us. Face it. That's I'm told that every day.
Yeah. And so what happens is that we found that women were thinking about what's going to happen in the future. Are mom or dad going to come and live with us? Do they have grandkids, and do they want to have a place for the grandkids to come? And so that general idea. So what we ended up seeing a need for was building homes in somebody's existing property. So the kids, if you will, want to make it an opportunity for mom or dad to come and live with them, but mom or dad nor the kids necessarily want to live in the same home if they can have a choice not to. Both want to have still their own independence, but they still would like them to be close by. Mom and dad, tending to be in the downsizing side of things, think it's great if they can have a home close to the kids, and then they can go travel and do whatever they want to do, but not be concerned about the security of the home. So what we ended up doing was that we saw that people needed to have certain design features in their home to prepare for all of us as we age. And as I'm sure it's been talked about on your show in the past, that every day 10,000 baby boomers turn 65. So the population is growing older and older. And so what we wanted to do was provide an option for someone to be able to have the ability to age in place and not have their home kick them out. So often somebody moves into their own home, or they buy an existing home, and the home cannot be accessible for them, so they can't get into their own bedroom because the doorways aren't wide enough. They end up having to walk or a wheelchair. So we ended up designing our transitional home environment to make those options available to people.
So give us an idea. I know this is all audio. We're not showing pictures or anything like that. So try to explain kind of the range of the size homes and kind of try to take us through the home itself, of the types of things that it would include, as for a older person who may be in a wheelchair or may be in a walker, or the bathrooms where a lot of falls occur. Talk to us more about that. Take us through that.
Yeah, what happens is there isn't a limit to size of what we do. We do all the way from small 4 to 500 square foot backyard homes and 600 square foot into multi-thousand square foot houses and apartment complexes down the side of a hill. But in the homes within the specific backyard type approach to it, depending on the state and country you live in, they vary on acceptable sizes. So, for example, in California, which is where we're located at, there are some requirements of homes can't be over 400 square feet or 600 square feet or 840 square feet. So they have variations of it. But what happens is what we look at in terms of designing into them is what somebody's life going to look like in the future. So I would imagine your listeners have heard the term universal design. The idea is that you want to make the home accessible to anybody that might come to the home. So whether they're fully capable to be able to get around, whether you're in a wheelchair or a walker, or whether mom or dad are pushing the kids in a stroller into the door. The idea is to make the hallways wide enough, and there's a code within California's building code, which is called the accessibility code, and they identify how wide does a hallway need to be to allow for handrails, how wide do doorways need to be. If you have future handrails that you might put in, how high are they supposed to be on the wall? They govern all the way things like that into electrical issues of how high does a wall socket need to be off the floor, and what's the maximum height for a wall switch. So what happens is we take these design elements from the accessibility code and design them into homes. The one that we recently developed is called the Maywood, and it's a 600 square foot home, and it has all the accessibility issues already designed into it, and it makes it possible for somebody to move in the home, and it already has blocking in the wall for handrails and hallways and bathrooms and things like that. But the idea is that if you don't need it, you don't need to do it. But at the same time, the structural part of the home is prepared for in the event that you want to do it, so it transitions with you throughout all the ages and stages of life. That's why we call it our transitional home environment.
And how many? You said you have about 3 that are more in that transitional home environment. 3 types of.
Right. There's 3 homes specifically designed that we already have designed that range between 600 and 1,200 square feet. Part of that has to do with the size of what is allowed in California, because you have variations in sizes that are allowed for backyard homes. But also, too, what we find is that 40% of what we do is custom. So somebody has their own ideas, and they say, here's what my ideal floor plan would look like. What we do is we find out where they're at in life. Is mom and dad going to live with them? Are they already in their 70s or 80s, and that type of approach. And what we do is we make suggestions of how the accessibility code could be designed into their custom plans. And more often than not, everyone is going, gosh, I didn't even know this was available. Let's do that.
So have you seen more of a demand for, from, let's say, a couple that realize that they want to plan better for their final years? They may be very healthy. Maybe they're in their 60s or 50s, and they just want a home that they could live the rest of their life in, and at least their hope is. Or is the greater demand coming from the adult children trying to get mom or dad or both of them to live on their property? Where's the greatest demand?
We actually see both of them, but probably for us, the larger demand is someone's building their own custom home, and they're in the boomer age group, and we make them aware of, here is this opportunity. It doesn't cost hardly anything to deal with it up front, and so here's what we suggest you do, and most of them will go, oh yeah, this just makes sense. However, there are some, though, that would have mom or dad that would they'd want to have come live with them. Some of those are a planned out process. Unfortunately, many of them are just kind of all of a sudden we're here, or mom or dad has died and the other one's left, and it's not good for them to be on their own. So all of a sudden they're there. So it's too fast to try to build a house that it can't just be done in a week, kind of thing. So what we've seen, though, which is it was a great example of one, was we had one in Southern California that was built. And the dad decided that he wanted to build a home on the kids' properties. And what was really interesting about it was that the kids were in their 70s, and dad was in his 90s.
All right.
So he always would refer to the kids, but they're 70-plus years old.
Yeah, that's always
and
amazing.
So what happened was dad, he in his 90s, still out walking every day, multiple miles, has a group of friends that he would walk with. And so what ended up happening was, we actually had, when we first introduced the product, this is one of our first customers, and the Huffington Post happened to see some advertising that we were doing about it, and it interviewed this customer. And the part that was pretty exciting about it was that dad was the one that was actually driving this. He was completely functional and capable, but the thing we found in terms of some of our initial marketing was we talked about the accessibility codes and stepless entrances and easy open windows and things like that. But what happened was he didn't want to have anything to do with those ideas. But the kids were concerned about it, because when you get into your 90s and hundreds, obviously you're not going to be sure-footed that whole, till the end of your life. Now, some are, but most end up not being as sure-footed as they were when they were 50. So what ended up happening was that we started talking about the home automation features that went along with that, about how you can press one button and it turns on the cable box and the TV and the sound system and dims the lights. That same type of technology is also what's used in getting into in-home care. So if you have somebody who's on their own, wants to have their own independence, but you still need to be able to have the ability to check in on them, or have some type of monitoring through sensors and things like that, that if mom doesn't get out of bed in the morning when she normally does, there's a message sent to you on your cell phone or email or text message of, hey, mom's not out of bed and it's 10 o'clock and she's usually out of bed at 9. So what we found was that dad liked the idea when it didn't make it like he was old. What we found is that everybody is in that stage. They don't want to make it out like it's old. They're old and they're going to have all these problems. But if you plan for it ahead of time, then it works out really great.
That's great to have that tech, because there's some great technology out there, and I guess it's probably a lot less expensive to build that in when you're building the house than trying to do it afterwards. At least I think for some of it. Is that right?
Yeah, it is. What we do in our transitional home environment is we have what's designed into our plans as a structural wiring hub. In our process, we provide primarily a framing kit, which consists of frame walls and roof trusses. The exterior walls have a siding or sheathing on. The windows are installed in place, but it's an open panel. So after you have a foundation done and then our package is stood up, then from there you still do plumbing, electrical, insulation, sheetrock, that type of stuff. A structural wiring hub would commonly be in the master bedroom closet, or if it's just a one bedroom, it's in the bedroom closet. And all the main wiring comes back to one central location. And what happens is that you need to be able to have the ability for a lot of these components to be wired, like cable boxes or video for outside for security and things like that. All come to one central location. The wiring at the front end while you're building it doesn't cost much to do that. If you try to go back and do it later on, it is expensive. So what you end up happening is that while most of the devices are controlled wirelessly, they normally are best run for speed. They all come to one central location and they wire from that point.
Got it. So I'd like to, I'm sure you've received some challenging questions from adult children. I'll throw out one, and I'd love you to, respond to that, and it will just help, I think, our listeners understand a little more detail. So one I could think of right away, and I'm sure you have a good answer for it, is, hey, I don't want to have to deal with the permits in my city and do all of this. You're saying that it depends on certain size house. I don't want to have to deal with that.
Mm-hmm.
So how do you respond to that?
There's two ways to do it. One of them is our dealers can help them take care of that for you. So if you want to pay somebody to do it, you can. However, what we found is that when you have an individual and you say you can save 20 to 30% of the building cost of your home by dealing with these permit processes and handling subcontractors and things like that, when you're talking about 20 to 30% of the building cost of a house, it's a lot of money. So what happens is you end up telling somebody can do it for you and you can pay for it, or you can save 20 to 30%. Most people say, I'm going to learn how to do that because it's a lot of money. It's a big savings. So if you're going to build a $300,000 house and you decided you're going to have a general contractor take care of it, 20 to 30% of that cost is for him to manage the project and for him also for profit, which are legitimate charges because there's a lot of work to do with it. But if there's a way to be able to see somebody you can save $50,000, people don't mind learning. And going through the permit process is not that complicated because we're going to help direct you on what are the components that you need. You submit the paperwork to the building department, then they generate any questions that they have, and we handle the questions of what's happening, or if there's any other trades that had to do with it, they handle the questions. It's not like you're on your own and you have no clue about what you're doing.
Yeah. Well, what are some other types of questions that you get from families that I'm not asking? What are some common ones you think you get?
It's interesting. The more of it is revolving around emotional things, because people, when they hear about building a home for mom and dad, everybody has their own independence. You can build a home that's safe for them, and they can go through all their ages and stages of life. Also, too, some people build them for rentals, so for income stream as well. But what ends up happening is more of it's like we're working with one right now, and dad passed away a year or so ago, and the kids are concerned mom's by herself, and she's 80-something years old, and they want her to move up to their place. Well, the problem is that mom has her whole life established in the area where she's at now. All of her friends are there. So she's looking at, why am I going to go move up there and be all isolated from all my friends? Why do I want to do that? Mm-hmm. So there's a process of emotionally, how do you deal with those types of things? In fact, I've been communicating with some gerontologists that are working on writing an article for our blog that talks about from two different angles. One, how do you deal with helping your parents make that transition? Because even though their friends may be there, they can't stay there indefinitely because of security issues, unless there's some way to have somebody that's going to be there all the time, which that usually isn't practical. And the other side of it, too, is from the kids' standpoint, how do we incorporate mom or dad or both sometimes to come live in our area or right there by our property? And sometimes it's been interesting because the gerontologists that I've been speaking with, they go through like counseling times of trying to figure out how to work through issues that have gone on in life, that type of stuff. So the issues tend to be more revolving around emotional things, which an illustration of that, which was interesting, when the Huffington Post article was written, which you can find on our website at pmhi.com under In the News. And in the article, it was the title, which was terrible. When you go through these interviews, Frank, as you know, you don't know for sure what somebody's going to say or what they're going to do. Right. And so I go through this interview with the Huffington Post, and they ask you all the questions, so you just wait to see what the article says. The article comes out, and the title of it was Housing Trend, Stash Granny in a Backyard Shed. And I thought, oh boy, that's terrible. And I'm the vice president of sales and marketing something, and this is really bad. I got to deal with damage control. What am I going to do? What press releases do I got to take care of? This was not I didn't choose this article title and those types of things. But what was really interesting, though, is the article hit, and then from that point in time, you always have the opportunity for people to comment on the article. And there was an astounding number of people that commented on the article, over 850 comments on the article. I've never seen an article with that many comments before. Mm-hmm. And what it was the article was talking about people commenting on how dare you say that about my grandma, I'd never shove her in a shed, you have no feeling, no heart, all that kind of stuff. Other people were talking about other places they'd like to shove their grandma. But the story, as people shared, it kind of distilled down to people sharing about a time when they got to live with their grandmother or grandpa, when they came and lived with them, when they were able to care for them. And they shared fond stories of that time and a time that was gone. And many of them, it seems like you could actually almost like hear them like weeping a little bit because they were talking about how they wish they could have that time back. Of, gosh, I wish my grandma or my grandpa were still alive. I remember that time so fondly. We even had customers of ours that had built with us that were sharing how they lived in their home and how wonderful it was. But the thing was is the transition of whether you build a home with us and how that process works is so pale in comparison to the emotional part that goes along with it.
Yeah, I mean, it's great you brought that up. I mean, as you know, my company, we work with people to help them in finding the right places to live and get proper care, and we deal with that on an everyday basis. So it's a big part of it, absolutely, a huge part of it. So I don't know if you want to talk costs, but obviously you can't forget about the land for a second, but you have 3 different types. Could you share with us kind of a range, low to high, of what this would, what type of investment people would be making into something like this?
Oh yeah, that's easy. We're proud of our prices. So if you go on our website at pmhi.com, you'll see our prices right there on all of our plans. We put it in specific, and what's kind of interesting is that we're providing the framing kit. So it's basically a part of the home. So we put into our computer system lineal footage of wall, number and size of windows, and so on, and it generates a specific price. So like, for example, the Maywood that I had mentioned earlier, which is a 600 square foot house, our package price is $20,067. And you have that price plus tax for the county or state that you're in. And then you also would have delivery costs, which depending on where you're at, it's not a significant cost. It's in the thousands of dollars if you're further away from us, but it can vary. But then you have your drafting, engineering, and trust calculations is the structural part of the plan that has to be submitted to the building department. The cost for that for our Maywood is $2,606 plus that $20,000 number. So that's our part of it. But then you have the building cost of the structure, and on our website under the information tab, there's a prices tab in there. And it helps explain kind of an idea of how much would it cost to build. And generally speaking, varies by area and part of the world that you're in, because labor rates vary hugely. Typically, our package is 1/3 to 1/4 of the total. So if you just generally say it's about $20,000, so that means building costs would be somewhere around $60,000 to $80,000 to build that. However, it can vary hugely because depending on how somebody would build the inside of the home, would vary a lot. Like, for example, we have one that's featured on our website that's a 1,000-square-foot structure and was built in the greater San Francisco Bay Area. And this couple is in their, I think they're late 60s, if I'm remembering this right. And what they did was they built this home, but they built the home in their ideal world of what they wanted. So what happened was the ceilings in the whole house are 10 feet tall, and they have big vaulted ceilings inside, so it's 16 foot tall in the highest part of it. They have all commercial ranges in all appliances, so that all the commercial appliances that they had were $10,000 just for the appliances. So you can go and get as fancy as you want to. That doesn't change our price, but it obviously changes the cost of whatever you're doing. So if you're looking at $60,000 and then you add another $10,000 in appliances just because you want this really wonderful Viking double oven, then there's some variation. So there's ways to make it more expensive and there's ways to make it less expensive. But it all comes down to what that person wants to do.
Great. Well, Ken, this has been very, very informative, and I want to thank you again for taking the time to come on. Ken Rader with Pacific Modern Homes. You could go directly to their website at www.pmhi.com. And Ken, thanks so much for joining us. Great information. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, Frank.
And thank you all for joining us on the Aging Boomers. Just be safe out there, and we'll talk to you all soon.